And instantly, for the first time in my life, I was talking to someone who had what I had and was in a space where they wanted to get better. And she's told me that she did get better.
This is UNSILENT, a speak series from NoStigmas that champions mental health advocacy and challenges the stigmas that prevent people from getting the help they need. I'm Eli Lawson, a producer for the show. To end our first season, we're going to be splitting Lance Bortolone's conversation with New York Times bestselling author Christie Tate into 2 parts. This week, in part 1, we'll hear about Christie's family upbringing and how a lack of openness, among other factors, contributed to her bulimia and negative body image. If you want to learn more or contact us, visit nostigmas.org. Don't face it alone. Be unsilent. This week's episode contains mentions of bulimia and suicidal idealization. While there's nothing explicit, it could be triggering for some. It's okay if you need to skip this one. Do what's right for you.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and kind of your connection to the cause?
Sure. So I grew up in Dallas and I had a home life that was mostly stable, but some of the factors that impacted me, I understand now negatively, was we were very Catholic and I internalized a lot of messages about being tough and enjoying pain. I'm not even saying that the Catholic Church told me that, but when I'm seeing the agony of Christ and all these bloody things, I was like, oh, that's how you become a good person. That's how you are sanctified and justify yourself. Like, I was a pretty morbid kid, and you throw that on there and it was like gas on a fire. And when I was in 2nd grade, I remember praying at night, praying for the stigmata, which is super morbid. And I didn't tell anyone. I thought that's what we were supposed to be doing. So also I was really, really into ballet, which is a problem because ballet's a pretty rigid art form, and it certainly was in the 70s and 80s. Nobody knew how to talk to little girls about their bodies. No one was talking about shame. And I would just go there twice a week with my whole heart out on display. And I would be told, suck in your stomach. Could you lose weight? My ballet teacher, when I was in 7th grade, so now I'm hitting puberty and I have a lot on my plate emotionally, right? And I'm not talking to anyone. There's no mental health support at this point. And she's like, couldn't you go on the diet where you just eat 3 eggs in the morning and 3 eggs at night? And that's it. So, and that was the person I loved and trusted the most in the world outside of my parents. And so into this, I become bulimic and I'm extremely perfectionistic. There's some alcoholism. There's also recovery in my family, which is wonderful and probably saved me untold agony. But into addiction, I became my own sort of addict, and I was bulimic. And thank goodness when I got to college, I just hit bottom, probably because I saw my parents who's in recovery. I saw him go to meetings and I was like, well, is there anything for those of us with eating problems? I got into a 12-step program for eating, and it saved I don't know what would have happened to me if I'd have kept binging and purging. That does not end well. And it was wonderful to get the miracle of recovery, but there was still something else missing in me or broken. I don't know the best words to talk. All these conversations, I don't want to make it sound like, I don't want to use bad language. Language really, really matters.
Right.
The most neutral way I can say it is I was missing a lot of skills because during skill acquisition years, I was binging, I was purging, I was crying in my room, and I had all these secrets. And so I became a young adult who didn't know how to have lasting relationships. And I was so sad about it. And I didn't think there was any hope. I just thought, okay, well, I know I'm smart, so I'll go to law school and I will have a great career, and I'll just try to work so much that I won't notice I have no friends and no family and no boyfriend and no children. That was going to be my consolation prize. The problem with that, which is obvious, but why I couldn't execute it is
you didn't see it at the moment.
Yeah, I was like, I'm kind of a genius, in the same way that, like, when I first started purging, I was like, this is great. What's the downside?
Oh my gosh.
A very naive, short-sighted solution to a problem. And I just developed suicidal ideation. Like, my life force, my recovery, something inside of me was like, please get help so you can have more. Like that's sort of what, like, don't do this, don't do this. And
Mm.
I ended up going to see a therapist, which I didn't think I could afford, didn't think I liked. I didn't like him, and I actually could afford him because it was group, which is 1/3 the cost of an individual session. The catch is you have to share your session with 7 people. um,
Yeah, I was like, obviously that the book is sort of why, I wanted to talk to you. So we'll get to the group piece too, because I've never experienced that. I want to hear about that.
Right. So when I'm in law school, I'm doing very well because I know how to do school. Don't have to talk to anybody. You just make good grades. When I started having this suicidal ideation, people I knew from meetings were saying, you know what, you need more help. And I kept saying, well, the 12-step program's all I need, but I did need more help. And I was willing to check out this therapist. And it started this journey I'm still on. 2 hours ago, I just had a group session. So I'm still there. I don't I'm a person who stays for a long time when something works, and it still seems to work for me. And I I I get a lot of questions from people like, "Why do you still go to therapy? When do you graduate?" One of the conversations I think that is interesting to have about this, and we may get to that, which is we don't in this country, we go to therapy when there's an emergency, and when the crisis has passed, we leave. And there's other ways to think of it, more like going to the gym or
Mm-hmm.
and I recognize there's a lot of barriers for a lot of people,
Right.
financial and time
Right.
wise. And I definitely recognize that. But if nothing else, I have made a lot of people uncomfortable because I go to a lot of therapy still to this day, even though my life is wonderful and stable. I still want the support because I think we all deserve scaffolding for these complex lives that we're living.
What was the conversation like in your family growing up? Like, you
Yeah.
mentioned sort of not really having, social interactions or kind of focusing on one thing to stay focused. But I mean, did you have conversations about any of that?
Yeah, every now and then, when I look back now, I can see I was trying to have these conversations and I was trying to get caught. I went to babysit one night, and this would have been, I was probably in 8th grade, and I went to babysit a family, friends of my parents. And while I was there, I was binging and purging, and I left a lot of evidence. Let's put it that way. And they called my parents, like, we think that Christie was like throwing up while she was here. And my parents called me into the living room. They wanted to know about this. I lied through my teeth. I don't know what you're talking about. That didn't happen. And that's denial.
Right.
I know none of us had the skills to deal with something as serious as bulimia and whatever else was going on with me. And then it happened again at home. My mom like found some evidence in the bathroom that something strange was happening in there, and I like blamed it on our cat. And you're so I have no grudge against my parents, but the truth is we did not have the skills to have those conversations. And so I could lie my way out of it and just say,
Right.
no, it's nothing, it's the cat. That's absurd. My parents are very smart people, but that's how strong addiction is. That's how painful it is to address. You pull the thread of one person in the family's illness, and everyone has to look at themselves and the whole system. Kids have eating disorders or people have addiction. It's a family system. I'm not a therapist, but like I understand we were all interconnected. And
Yeah.
for me to like fall into crisis would have required all of us to do a lot of deep work we were not yet ready to do.
If you or someone you know is experiencing a crisis, please call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-8255 or visit suicidepreventionlifeline.org for support via live chat. If you or someone you know is in immediate danger, please call 911. Other resources are linked in the show notes.
I had a little bit of therapy when I was a kid, like, 2 or 3 sessions, and then my experiences, my parents were like, "You done? You good?" And I was like, I knew the answer was supposed to be yes, even though we
Right.
hadn't even gotten started. And one time I was like, it seemed like all there's a lot of points in my childhood where I felt like I was reaching a crisis, and I could feel it, you feel it inside of you.
Yeah.
And I was scared. And I remember saying something to my parents, and my mom said, you could just decide to be okay. You could just decide to be okay. And it sounded like a dream, like I could. And so in how I internalized that message was, this is mind over matter. Don't be weak or gross, and don't give in to this lower part of your nature that seems to be flailing about. Decide to be okay. And so I think I had to find recovery when I left the household, because it just wasn't something I could do in the system that I was in.
Right. What was happening that took you to a point where you said you hit rock bottom, like what was that?
Yeah. I think, I was preoccupied with my body from a very young age. And it's a confluence of events, right? Like I was into ballet, you put on a leotard, I saw how skinny other girls were. I was not, again, like language is so scary. Like the charts at the pediatrician were that I was overweight.
Right.
I was not fat, but I was overweight. And as a consequence, I don't recall my pediatrician like shaming me, but I remember feeling shame. And my mom, I remember she would make lunch for me, and my dad and I were more of the portly ones in the family. We were fleshier, and then everybody else was like trended toward this thin side. And so we would have a different lunch, and it was a different kind of plate. And there was like this effort to control our eating. So that's eating and body image is a huge part of it, of course. But what I came to understand later was I had stuffed all these feelings, like everything. I stuffed everything. I was a little girl in Texas in the 80s, and I was supposed to smile and be sweet and make people like me. As a consequence, I had years of rage, just like stuffed down to my heels, then my knees. And eating disorder isn't just about being thin. It's about all the repressed feelings. And I was involved in a traumatic accident right before high school, where a friend of mine, we went to Hawaii, and her dad drowned while we were there. I was already bulimic by the time we went to the beach, and her father died. But coming back, now I have a legit, I can point to traumatic event. No one's going to dispute that was traumatic.
Right.
But now I've got the pressure to come back and be okay. Like I remember I was really sad. Like this was 2 months after the accident. I'm in like freshman trigonometry, having a very hard time. And I remember my mom was like, can't you just be okay? Like she needed me to be okay. And I was not okay, but I knew how to play the part. So part of that was just like, well, I'm going to have to eat a ton. And then when I get tired of being fat, I'm going to throw it up. And that's just how it went in my 13, 14, 15-year-old brain.
Right.
And then that's all a secret. So now I've added a secret onto that. And it's really hard to keep the kind of bulimia a secret when you are eating that much. I mean, people are going to notice if all the Teddy Grahams are gone. The morning after Thanksgiving, there's no pie left. Where did the pie go? So it was a very stressful, all secrets are stressful and full of shame. And, I was like, and I got a job. So I had to get a job to support my habit. And I got a job at a bakery. So now I'm the alcoholic who works at a bar, like a bite of this, a bite of that. And when I think about that, it's just little Christie was trying so hard to survive, and her addiction was just like wildly out in the open, but no one knew what to look for.
Right. So many people that I've gotten to speak to, both on this series and just in this job, have just over and over and over said that I don't feel seen. I didn't feel seen. I didn't feel heard. I didn't feel seen. That seems to be a common thread, and it manifests in so many different ways, diagnosed or undiagnosed, or not something that's diagnosable. But how it's kind of segueing into your recovery and, those steps that you've taken. When did you first feel seen? When did you first feel heard? Was there a moment?
Yeah, I had the very miraculous feeling of the first time I went into a 12-step meeting, and I went to a newcomers meeting, and it was like 30 minutes before the actual meeting. So it was me and just one other woman. She was not my age. She was not my size. She was not bulimic, but she was talking about the way that she ate and the shame she felt about it. And instantly, for the first time in my life, I was talking to someone who had what I had and was in a space where they wanted to get better. And she's told me that she did get better. And I like, even talking about it now, I feel that's as close to ecstasy as I like the ecstatic feelings, not the
Yeah.
there is just, I will never, ever, ever forget my awe at that first conversation. And I've probably had thousands of conversations since. I've been on both sides of a conversation with someone hurting around food. I cannot believe the power of a story between two people who are suffering and witnessing each other.
Right.
And so I would say that very first recovery meeting was the first time I felt really seen and safe to say the things I'd been hiding from the world for, by that point, like 12 years. That's a long time.
This is UNSILENT. Thank you for listening. Today's episode was hosted by Lance Bordelone and produced by me, Eli Lawson, Lance, John Panicucci, and the rest of the incredible NoStigmas marketing team. Special thanks to Christie Tate for taking the time to share her story with us. Next week, we'll finish up the conversation in part 2, the final episode of season 1. To go beyond the show, connect with us on social media or visit nostigmas.org to learn more about mental health topics. Please leave us a 5-star review and share with others wherever you listen to podcasts. We'd really appreciate it. New episodes of UNSILENT come out every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Finally, remember that whatever you're going through, you don't have to do it alone. Be UNSILENT. We'll see you next week.